In this lesson, moving forward, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a Jumbotron using Bootstrap 4 Alpha, and then of course we'll also insert a background image. So we have our navigation bar, and next I'm going to demonstrate how to create a background image and using a Jumbotron. And recall, a Jumbotron simply is a big box for calling extra attention to some special content or information. So it's displayed as a gray box with rounded corners, and that you can of course resize and use based on your own requirements. So let's jump right in. Let's navigate to our editor, and here's our code that we've been writing so far. So let's go ahead and let me move up here right after this div, which is after our nav bar, right? So let me place a comment here, and this will allow us to, let's say, creating Jumbotron, right? Close our comment, and next let me open up a tag called section class, and this equals Jumbotron text XS, and then of course center. That's what I'm going to use. Do another div class, get our container in here, and I'm not going to keep it fluid. I'm going to keep it just container, and then of course our h1 tag class, and this is where our heading goes. So I'm going to use Jumbotron heading, and I'm going to call it the 3 R's. Okay, so our web page is essentially all about, let's say, recycling and environmental pollution. You can create your own web page, but for now I'm going to create the 3 R's, which is reuse, reduce, and then recycle, right? So these are the 3 R's that we're going to use. So this is our heading 1, and then open up a paragraph tag. So p class, I'm going to use the lead text muted, and use the recycle, reuse, and then reduce, and then close the p tag. Next, open up a div, and this div would contain a couple of anchor tags. So a href, and this contains simply a couple of links. And this could be any link such as www.claydesk.com, and the class equals button. That's what I'm doing here, just placing the buttons info, and the text on the button is going to say read more. Of course, close the anchor tag. I also need a quotations here. Perfect. The next anchor tag is going to be the same, but this is going to be for the secondary button. So I'm just going to copy this, make things a little faster, right? So this is going to be, let's say, another link here to the eCampus, and instead of the info, I'm going to change it to secondary, and change the text to say click here. Great. Make sure my div tag is closed, and then the section is also closed. Great. So here we created a Jumbotron. So once this is created, next we need to style it, right? So let's go back to our style sheet, which is 3r.css. And here I'm going to start creating the selector and setting some properties for Jumbotron. So here's the Jumbotron, open our curly braces, and specify a certain padding to the top to be 6 rem. Now here the rem is something new in Bootstrap 4 Alpha. Okay, so this is basically in a move to help streamline the CSS. Bootstrap version 4 Alpha basically dropped the Internet Explorer IE 8 support, as I mentioned earlier, and a host of other CSS3 polyfills, right? So by supporting the IE 9 Plus, it's been able to embrace some additional CSS modules. And one of these is rem, or called root m unit. which calculates font size relative to the root element HTML. Okay, so based on the HTML, it calculates the font size. So therefore, we specify, for instance, when we create the Jumbotron, for the padding, I specified 6 rem. And you can play with it. You can specify 5 for, so depending upon the size of the rectangular box that you like to be displayed on top of your background image. So once I have the padding, next I'm going to specify the bottom padding to be also 6 rem. Get my margins for the bottom equals 0. The background color, and we'll leave it all white, so it'll be 3 Fs, and then of course our background image, and this is going to be URL. In this instance, since we are using our own folder, so this is going to come from the img folder, and the image is called flower.jpg. Once we have the background image, just specify additional properties such as background repeat, no repeat, and then the position also. Place it at bottom, let's say center. Get rid of this here. And then the size of the background is going to be for the cover, right? Because we want the large image to be displayed. So just choose background size as cover. Great. So once I have this, next I'm going to specify, let me scroll down so you can see, enter some spaces. So my next step is to do Jumbotron heading. Open the curly braces. So once the curly braces are opened, just specify the font weight, for example, and set this to 300. Now essentially what we're doing here is we're simply calling these classes that we created within our HTML document, right? So for example, let me in fact quickly show you this. So the .jumbotron and then the .jumbotron-heading, in fact, if I were to go to my HTML, notice I'll find the Jumbotron here that I specified, okay? And same thing for the Jumbotron heading. So all I'm doing here is creating a reference for these classes, right? So that once I create a style sheet, the style is being implemented on these and within these div classes. Great. So let's go back to our CSS. So here's my heading. Right after the heading, I'm going to do Jumbotron one more time. And for the P here, open the curly braces, specify the color, and this is going to be white, and then do the text as shadow, so that when the Jumbotron is created, it's a little transparent box, right? Not even transparent, it's going to be a shadow. And you'll see in just a minute what it looks like. Specify the positioning, so 0, 0, 10 pixels. Standard colors, RGBA. And I'm going to leave it as 0, 0, 0, and 0.5. Perfect. So once I have the paragraph class called here, right? So this Jumbotron P is essentially referencing, if I were to go back to my HTML, notice here's the paragraph class, right? So all I'm doing here is specifying the font for the recycle, reuse, and reduce text. Great. Let's go back to our code. So one more thing I need to do is to create another Jumbotron for the container, right? So this will be .container, curly braces, and specify the max width to 40 rem, and then the background with our standard colors RGBA. And this time I'm going to use, let's say, the 255, 255, 255, and then 0.2, and then use padding. Specify this to be 2 rem. This needs to be a colon here, so 2 rem, perfect. And then one last thing, the color. I'm going to keep it as white as well. Perfect. So let's save this. Let's see what it looks like. Let me go ahead and save the HTML file also. Perfect. Switch to our browser. Let's refresh. And voila, great. So we have our background image. And here's the Jumbotron. Okay, so here's the shadow. We have our text called the 3 R's. And we have the 2 buttons called read more and then click here. And of course, the buttons are being linked to an external site. Now notice our background image is fine, which is great, and our Jumbotron works perfectly fine also. But what has happened here is our navbar, for some reason, has increased in size because notice the background image. So let's go to our code and fix it. All right, so here's our divs, and where's my navbar div? Right here, and this is closing right down here. All right, so here's the problem first. So I'm just gonna scroll down here first and verify. Yes, so here's the div here. So I'm just gonna remove this div, in fact, and place it under here. So now our navbar is separated as a div. And then within our Jumbotron, of course, with my paragraph, I need to close the tag here as well. Perfect. Let's save one more time and switch to our browser, refresh. All right, great. Now it's perfect. So now we have our navbar, we have our background image, and then we also have our wonderful Jumbotron. And recall the new functionality that I demonstrated was the REM, which essentially calculates the font size relative to the root element, which is the HTML. And taking these REM units further, you can really start to delve into responsive typography. As all font sizing, for example, is based on our root element, we can create media queries, for example, to alter sizes at different breakpoints. And you can combine this with the new grid breakpoint mix-ins, and voila, you have your REMs in action. So I hope this helps practice, and let's move to the next lesson